Okay, you can control.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll let everybody in the room get situated and get started in another minute. Welcome to ArcPoint Labs DOT Part 2 webinar. I'm going to work on sharing my screen so we can see this here. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our DOT update from ArcPoint Labs. We've got lots of fun things to talk about today and a couple awesome speakers. I'll give it another minute before we get started. All right, I will go ahead and kick this off. My name is Jamie. Thank you for everybody for joining ArcPoint Labs in our DOT Update Part 2 webinar. We're going to cover the clearinghouse changes that are happening in the FMCSA world. And I just wanted to make sure everybody can hear me loud and clear. Are we good? Also know that if you're attending and you are an HR credentialed professional, we actually have this continuing ed offering for both term and HRCI credit. So if you attend 100% of our webinar today, you'll be emailed a certificate at the end of the week with those informations. So I wanted to just pass this over to Leslie Prince. She is our compliance solution partner, and give that over to her for I'm sorry, for introducing our speaker today with Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jamie. So we had a great time last week with Patrice Kelly from Endesa. I think we learned a lot about the oral fluid testing regulations, and I hope that if you have had any questions in the last week that you have reached out to your ArcPoint local representative and posed those questions to them and are starting to think about what you need to do to comply with the regulations. Again, the labs are making progress with their certification, so you do need to be making plans accordingly for your own company. If you missed last week's webinar, and it was recorded, and again, reach out to your local ArcPoint team and they will be happy to connect you to that. So today we are continuing our DOT compliance webinar with our compliance series with Kevin Elrod. Kevin is a safety investigator in the FMCSA Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Georgia division. He is down in the Atlanta or the Georgia area with me. He's actually in the Savannah area and works South Georgia. So if you all are tuned in from that area, you may have run into Kevin occasionally. He has a vast wealth of information that he's going to share with us today. But I think the thing that is makes Kevin most relatable is he has a background in logistics. He was a driver, he was a safety manager, so he has sat in your seat, regardless of whichever seat you're sitting in. He knows where you are. He understands where you're coming from. He understands your struggles and just has some great solutions for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. He's going to talk to us about the clearinghouse regulations, specifically Clearinghouse II, that those regulations take effect in November. At the end, we will stop short of our end time and take some questions. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We're monitoring that. Please, there's chat and there's Q&A. Please put them in the Q&A so that we can monitor those, and I'll reconnect at the end, and Kevin and I'll work through those questions. So again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Hope you're learning some stuff as we go into the end of the year, because things are a-changing. So Kevin, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Leslie. Thank you, Jamie, and thank all of you for being here today. My name is Kevin Elrod. I have been with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration as a safety investigator for 5 years. Before this, prior to my tenure here, I was a safety director for a company out of Georgia, a 750 power unit company. We transported hazardous materials in bulk tank, container, intermodal freight, flatbed, dry, refrigerated, kind of dabbled into everything, dump trucks. If it'll go on a highway on some wheels, we would haul. Did that for 5 years prior to this. My life kind of started in trucking when I was young in North Georgia. My father had a little small five vehicle fleet, hopper bottoms. So I lived in Chicken City, USA, which is Gainesville, Georgia. Grew up there. Dad had trucks there. We would haul feed from Cargill out to the chicken plants. So I learned how to drive split stick old Peterbilts when I was 14 years old back in 1984, when you could do that at 10 o'clock at night on the weekends, and your dad taught you how to drive trucks. So I learned how to drive them. I learned how to operate them. I learned how to work on them a lot. He was also a mechanic, took care of all his own company equipment, and spent 27 years in the United States Army. In the Army, I pretty much drove anything they had. I just loved to drive. That kind of warded off into dirt track racing at one point or another, and some bull riding and jumping out of airplanes and everything. So I've learned to calm down a little bit. Retired from the Army, and when I retired from the Army, the first thing I did was go into driving a truck. I wanted to drive around the Southeast, and Southeast kind of turned into OTR all over the U.S. I was hauling cooking oil in a non-baffled smoothbore tank. So left there, kind of got into dispatch, then left dispatch, got into operations, left operations, got into safety. I ramped up an intermodal company in Oakwood, Georgia, right before taking the safety job with the company out of Sandersville, Georgia, and in return leading me here. So to say that I've sat in a lot of seats, I've sat in seats with steering wheels, and I've sat in seats that I wish had a steering wheel that I could drive out. But happy to be here, and hope that you will get something from this today. So if there's any questions, I think they were talking about anything you need or any questions you have during the presentation, you can put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to get to those as soon as possible. So getting into the meat of this, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. You guys have to understand that I was an infantry guy. I was a ranger for a lot of years, so technology is not my friend, but I will pull this up, and I hope everyone can see that. If I can get some kind of confirmation that that is up and it is being shared.
Not yet. We
Not
still see
yet.
you.
You still see me?
Yeah.
Well, we want you to see something a lot better than that. So let's try. Like I said.
Understood.
How about?
Yep,
Yeah.
there we go. All right, way to go. Good job.
All right. Things just go your way sometimes. So anyway, again, my name is Kevin Elrod. A lot of people know me by Patrick because the government just for some reason wanted to put that name on everything that I have. But Kevin is what my mom and grandmother called me, so that's what I kept doing. So today we're going to discuss the clearinghouse. I do not want anyone to think that I'm trying to be redundant in any way or test anyone's knowledge or ignorance for that matter, but I like to start at the beginning and just work our way through, just to make sure that we are all on board with the processes that we have for the clearinghouse. So with that said, I'm going to, okay. So the agenda for today with this presentation is an overview of the clearinghouse, the registration process, queries and consent requests, violations, common issues, and then we're going to get into the Clearinghouse II right before the frequently asked questions and next steps. So the overview of the clearinghouse is the clearinghouse was mandated by Congress through MAP 21 in section 32402. It was published in December of 2016 in the event anyone ever asked you when it was actually published, and established requirements for the clearinghouse, and that was implemented on January 6th of 2020. This slideshow will also be available for anyone after this. So if you want to use any of these links to go to, these are the most up-to-date links that we have for the final rule. So you can have that at your disposal. So who is required to use the clearinghouse? So we know drivers who hold commercial license or CDL permits, employers of CDL drivers who operate commercial motor vehicles, consortia, third-party administrators, CTPAs, medical review officers, substance abuse professionals, SAPs, the substance abuse professionals that kind of come in later, state driver's license agencies, the SDLAs, which is where we're going with the Clearinghouse II. The FMCSA Commercial Driver's License Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. If you're looking from left to right, if you're looking for the succession of how this works, the record, employers and medical review officers report violation information to clearinghouse, positive tests, refusals to test, actual knowledge, things of that nature. The clearinghouse secure database retains the violation and CDL or CLP number, includes driver status and return to duty processes. If any of you ever seen or looked in the clearinghouse at a positive driver, you'll see that it'll have all the information, whether the driver has submitted to a SAP has gotten in touch with the driver, done an evaluation, if that process has been completed, what the date that completion was, things of that nature. Queries, employers and CTPAs query the clearinghouse for violation information with driver consent. And if a driver does not consent to that, then can't pull it. FMCSA uses data for enforcement purposes. So what we'll do is we'll go in, just for an example, a carrier does a DQ file. They're doing everything the way they feel like they need to. They do everything but check the clearinghouse. So they have a driver that ends up driving for them that is actually prohibited in the clearinghouse. So during an enforcement process, we would go in and show that the clearinghouse was not checked. The driver was never sent a consent, or the driver was sent a consent and did not consent to you checking it, and the carrier used the driver anyway. So the carrier would be liable for that driver's actions or that driver operating in commerce for you while prohibited. State enforcement agencies will receive driver eligibility status, either prohibited or not prohibited, and drivers can access only their own information. And a lot of drivers have no clue that they can go in and do that. But if you talk to most drivers, they'll tell you they don't even know how to get into the clearinghouse. Increase in safety on our nation's roadways, that is the key behind this. This is getting people off the road who are or have committed a violation by failing a controlled substance or alcohol test. So real-time access to reported violation information for select registered users, easier for employers to meet pre-employment investigation reporting obligations like we were speaking about a minute ago, more difficult for drivers to conceal drug and alcohol violations from employers, and more insight into employer compliance with drug and alcohol testing rules. So used to, a driver could go take a, work for you, carrier one, decide they want something better. So they go to carrier two, put an application in, go take a pre-employment test, fail that pre-employment test, and just come back to work for you the next day. You'll never know the difference. Driver will clean up before the next random or the next annual review, whatever they need to do. So now you can get in the clearinghouse and you can see if that driver had taken a pre-employment and if that pre-employment was positive. Am I covered by the clearinghouse rule? So this kind of lets you know who is covered by the rule. All CDL drivers who operate CMVs on public roads and their employers and service agents. This includes, but is not limited to, interstate and intrastate motor carriers, including passenger carriers, school bus drivers, construction equipment operators, limousine drivers, municipal vehicle drivers, such as waste management. Look at waste management, fire truck. You're looking at anything that's going to qualify as 10,001 pounds of CMV. Federal and other organizations that employ drivers subject to FMCSA drug and alcohol testing regulations, Department of Defense, municipalities, again, school districts, things of that nature. Government entities are not required to obtain a US DOT number under 49 CFR Part 390. However, they are subject to the Controlled Substance and Alcohol Testing Regulations in 49 CFR Part 382. And again, there's a link at the bottom here that you can use once this is complete and you get a copy of this. You can use this to dig in a little deeper, just to be advantageous to your knowledge of what the Part 382 when it comes to the clearinghouse actually requires. Driver requirements, they are required to register in the clearinghouse. Be sure to add and verify their CDL. Needed to view violation history, respond to query, consent request, and designate a SAP. So drivers have a responsibility, because if they want to see their information, and they want to see why they're prohibited, and they want to see what their SAP status is, they have got to make sure they've got to be able to get into the clearinghouse. The trucking company that I used to, that I was employed, anytime we had an annual review on a driver, when I brought the driver in to go over their MVR, to go over whatever we're going to go over, I always had them log into their clearinghouse just so I was comfortable and I could keep record that the driver knew how to log into their clearinghouse and that they knew how to go in and look to see what their status is, because it's theirs, it's their career, and they need to know that. Consent, respond to consent requests for full queries from current and potential employers. All pre-employment queries are full queries. A pre-employment will never, ever be anything but a full query. This includes positive tests, test refusals, and actual knowledge. Designate an SAP if needed to record return to duty or RTD information. At the bottom, there is some verbiage down there. Failure to provide consent to a request for a full query will result in the driver being prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions, including operating a CMV for that employer in accordance with 49 CFR 382.703. So what that's saying is, you send a driver, or you're going to send a driver to go and start the process of onboarding onto your carrier. You send a consent to that driver, and that driver does not answer that consent. That driver will be prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions and operating CMV for you. Now, the driver may have just found another job and said, you know what, I'm not even going to go over here because I don't want to. So you can't hire that driver or do anything with that driver until then. But if that driver wants to go somewhere else and answer that consent, then that's kind of how that works. Register as an employer. Indicate you are an owner operator. Link your FMCSA portal account as an option. Add and verify your CDL is optional for owner operators. Query, check if a driver is prohibited from operating a CMV. Pre-employment queries on any new driver. Annual queries on all drivers, including yourself, if you are an owner operator and have drivers that drive for you. Designate a CTPA is required. CTPA must report violations and return to duty information. Owner operators may designate a CTPA to conduct queries or conduct their own. Register, link to your FMCSA portal account. Again, that is optional. A lot of people like to do that because then they can go through there to get in there. Report CDL, driver, drug, and alcohol program violations, positive test refusals, and actual knowledge again. Queries, check if a driver is prohibited from operating a CMV. Pre-employment and annual. Designate a CTPA is optional. CTPA may conduct queries, report violations, and return duty information on your behalf. So let me go back to that for a second. On that designate at the end, for those of you who may use a CTPA or are a CTPA, you may conduct queries and report violations and return to duty information on the behalf of the motor carrier. I get a lot of times the carrier and the CTPA argue about who's supposed to have reported it. There's a positive driver, but I didn't report it because the CTPA was supposed to. The CTPA says, no, we don't report. The carrier has to report. Well, right here, it basically says either of you can report. So if you're doing it on behalf of the carrier, you very well can report those violations. MROs, register, self-certify. You meet all MRO qualifications per 40.121 of the special section. Report positive, adulterated, substituted drug test or test refusals as an SAP, if there are any here. Register, self-certify you meet all SAP qualifications per special section 40.281, and driver must designate you in the clearinghouse. Report, you enter return to duty information, date of initial SAP assessment, the date the driver determined eligible for return to duty testing. Registration. Isn't this fun? Registering for the clearinghouse. So you must have a login.gov account to register for the clearinghouse. And I apologize looking off to the left, the way my screens are, that it will not come here for some reason. Must have login with login.gov. When selecting a method for second factor authentication, do not select backup codes. After you have logged into your login.gov account, select your user role. So if you'll look to the right, it'll have your login.gov, your role selection, contact information, company information, designate your CTBA terms and conditions. It will walk you through and ask you at the bottom who you are and walk you through each step. So at the bottom, are you covered by DOT drug and alcohol testing regulations? You can click the little link there and find out and get punch in your information, and it will tell you if you actually fall under the regulatory compliance of the DOT drug and alcohol testing. Enter and validate your current commercial driver's license or commercial learner's permit information. Note this is required to view your clearinghouse record and respond to query consents. If they do not respond because they can't get in, that's going to lead to a lot of problems. Again, that's why I used to always make sure they knew how to get in. Include any leading zeros. Try entering without any special characters, spaces, hyphens, as requirements might vary by state. Register as an employer. Link to your FMCSA portal account. Again, it's optional, but from what I've seen, it's the best way to go. In my opinion, when I registered our carrier for the clearinghouse, I linked it to the portal, and that was the best thing I ever did. Select yes when asked if you're an owner operator. Designate a CTPA that is required. Must report violation information and conduct queries. Add and verify your CDL information. Needed to view violation history and respond to query consent requests. Again, you keep beating this down the door, down the roadway about making sure that you can respond to query consent requests. Employer clearinghouse registration has two paths: FMCSA portal users and non-portal users. If you have or should have a USDOT number, you should have a portal account. If you are a carrier on here and you do not access your portal account at least once or twice a month, I would strongly advise that you do that, because you can look at your roadsides you may not know you have. You can look at any clearinghouse information that you may not know you have. You can look at your drivers. You can look at anything that's happened with a crash. You can put, I mean, you really need to look, because it's ever changing, and drivers, a lot of drivers will be very honest with you about things, but you need to go in and check for yourself. Your portal account must have the correct user role. Drug and alcohol clearinghouse motor carrier can query and report. Drug and alcohol clearinghouse motor carrier admin can query, report, designate CTPA, and indicate carrier type. Basically, you're the one that can go in and make the changes and designate other people access to your clearinghouse. Again, down here, not sure which clearinghouse role you'll need. Go in and look at that, and you can have a link right over there to the right. Designated CTPA, a consortium third-party administrator, manages all or part of an employer's DOT drug and alcohol testing program. Employers should contact the CTPA prior to sending them a designation request in the clearinghouse. So before you designate a CTPA, just give them a heads up. Give them a call and say, hey, just in case you get an email saying that we just designated you, I was just letting you know. It's common courtesy. CTPAs must be registered in the clearinghouse before they can be designated. So that will, if I lose you, I will be right back, Jamie, and I apologize. the FMCSA just told me that my computer may shut down in less than a minute. So I will see if I can keep that from happening. If it does, I'll be right back on.
We'll keep everybody entertained. Don't worry.
And thank you, government. I'm from the government, and we're here to help. CTPAs must be registered in the clearinghouse for they're designated. So always remember, check to see if the CTPA is registered in the clearinghouse before you try to designate one. Employers select the actions a CTPA may take on their behalf. Owner-operators must designate at least one CTPA to complete the following: report violations or report RTD information. And one of the biggest reasons they do that is because the driver isn't going to go in and report themselves. So you need someone to do.
Oh, I bet you he got.
I think we did.
out.
Yeah, I think we just lost him. So let me just, I'm going to jump on in. This is Leslie again. And just since we are talking about the third-party administrators, as Kevin was saying, the FMCSA does allow third-party administrators to assist employers with their clearinghouse compliance. And so we can report violations, we can do queries, we can report the return to duty information. And many of the ArcPoint owners are listed as CTPAs, but all ArcPoint locations can help you with that, because compliance systems, as your compliance partner, can do that for you. So just if you have any questions about a third-party administrator, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local ArcPoint team, and they will certainly help you get registered with this third-party administrator, and we can help you with your program. A couple things I do want to highlight that Kevin has talked about so far. We talked about this last week. Patrice Kelly talked about when a refusal to test is, or what circumstances are considered to be a refusal to test. And basically what is important is that you know that if a person does not show up for a test and it is a pre-employment or return to duty, it is not considered to be a DOT refusal to test. As Kevin said, they obviously can't work for you because they have to have a pre-employment test to be your driver, but it should not be reported to the clearinghouse as a refusal to test. And by the same token, if they leave prior to the test beginning, and the definition of when the test begins is when the cup is opened or when they select the cup. If they leave and it's a pre-employment or return to duty prior to the test beginning, then it is not to be considered a refusal to test and not to be reported to the clearinghouse. Obviously, if it's a random test, if it is reasonable suspicion, post-accident, or follow-up, if they don't show up, or if they leave at any point in time before the test is completed, then it is considered a refusal to test. But just wanted to underscore that note about refusals to test when it comes to pre-employments and return to duty, because you don't want to be reporting refusals to the clearinghouse that are not technically DOT refusals. I think Kevin's back on, but I want to just, there's one more thing since he just mentioned it. For purposes of drug and alcohol testing and also for clearinghouse, if you have a driver with a permit, they are subject to the same regulations as if they have a CDL license. So there's some things that sometimes the regulations are different. The permitted driver obviously has to have a driver with them, and that sort of, there's some other things they have to do. But just know that for purposes of drug and alcohol testing and clearinghouse, a CDL permit or a CD permit is the same, is treated the same as a CDL license. So that permit, that permitted driver must be in your, or have to have a DOT pre-employment drug screen. They must be in your DOT random pool, and they also have to be clearinghouse compliant. So you have to have done a pre-employment query on them before they get behind the wheel. So just if you have any questions about that, you can certainly pop those questions into the question and answer, the Q&A, and we'll get those answered. And Kevin, are you back? He is muted. I think there we go.
I learned how to spell audio when I was away, and I learned how to spell video when I was away. Okay.
Awesome.
I really apologize for that.
We picked it right up. We
Hey,
talked
we
with
had a
Kevin. We were talking
great-
about the fact that some of the ARC Point locations are registered as TPAs, and then Compliance Systems works system wide with the ARC Point as a whole, and so we can serve in that role if they need. So I'm gonna turn it back to you.
Okay. Am I still sharing, or do I need to share it?
You need to share.
And-
Yep.
All right. I apologize for that. We had a brand new Windows 11 update, and apparently it shuts our computers off every 3 hours now for some odd reason. It's supposed to be every 24, but now it's every 3, and they're trying to fix it. So the next slide, right after I finish that last one, we're registering for the clearinghouse, MROs, and SAPs. So MROs, you enter your MRO license information and self-certify you meet all the MRO qualifications per special section 40.121. And again, we're doing this again. It's kind of redundant. The slide is a little redundant, and I apologize. The SAP also will self-certify that you meet all of the SAP qualifications. Invite assistance, ensure continuous access. Employers not required for portal users do not have this feature. So additional administrators register on the Clearinghouse website. So as it says here, if you're going to invite a user, you can invite users to create Clearinghouse Assistant account associated with your company. You can enter the user's email address to generate and send them an invitation, and only individuals authorized to enter information to Clearinghouse on behalf of you and your company should be invited. So always keep that in mind, and never invite anyone like, your neighbor that does all the cookouts and all that. Probably isn't a good person to invite. Queries and consent requests. A query is a check of the clearinghouse to ensure a CDL driver is not prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions such as operating a CMV due to a drug and alcohol program violation. All queries require driver consent. So with those two things there, I want to hit on a couple of those points. One, the last one, all queries require driver consent. So while you need to have the digital consent for all pre-employment, make sure that you have a driver's wet signature on a form that your company has that states that that driver understands that you will be pulling annual queries and that you will be using those annual queries just to make sure they still qualify to drive for you. And it is not a full query, but it is a query just to see if anything has changed. So having that on hand will keep us away. And if we show up or an attorney shows up, that is a great document to have, because it's showing that you are in compliance with just this exact bullet point there. On the top, on a query check in the clearinghouse to ensure a CDL driver is not prohibited from performing a safety sensitive function. I'm not going to get into that now because of time restraints, but do some homework and check and look at what a safety sensitive function is with a carrier or with a company that has a USDOT number. You will be interested in seeing what a driver cannot do for your company other than drive a CMV. Reason for query is an annual query. That is a limited query, like we just talked about. General consent done outside of the clearinghouse. Again, that document saying that you're going to do this. It may be electronic or wet signature, one time, or unlimited. The electronic signatures are fine. Most drivers need to come in, and a lot of them aren't real savvy with doing electronic signatures. Some are. You can do either one, but wet signatures means that you were sitting there and they told you. Limited consent form must specify time range. Pre-employment query, full query, specific consent provided electronic through the clearinghouse, required for each full query of an individual driver. It's just pretty much cut and dry. Query complete to the left over there, you'll see result, driver not prohibited. No violation information was found in the clearinghouse for the driver you queried. Then you'll see the one you don't want to see, the query complete, result records found, full query needed. So to go into a little short explanation of that, say that you have a driver been with you 2 or 3 years. It is their anniversary and you need to do an annual review. So you go in to do your annual review and you're going to do a limited query. So you do your limited query and this query comes up. Once you get that, you hit the button, send consent request, and that will alert the driver that they need your consent in order to do a full query. The full query will then let you know that the driver is prohibited, or if there's something, maybe they've just gone through a SAP and something didn't get uploaded, but it'll let you know something is wrong. Drivers will log into the clearinghouse to respond to a consent request. Query consent request will be displayed on the driver dashboard. This is what a lot of carriers don't see. So your driver dashboard will come in with a welcome. It's a driver dashboard. Looks a little different than the carrier's does. No drug and alcohol violations. We'll tell them right off the bat. You have a sample request here at the bottom. They can check the green box or the red box. And it has their violation summary off to the right there. So they can keep up with, what's going on in their clearinghouse, which I encourage drivers to do, because there are a lot of drivers that have the same names, and not all the time do CDL numbers get put in correctly. So your employee query results, full query, just an example right here. I'm not going to go through it. I'm sure all of you that have ever pulled one will see this. Your query overview, this is what you're going to see as you go down the page. You're going to see your employer information, driver information, the violation information. It'll have the type of violation, the reason for test was a random, type of test refusal, failed to appear for any test. So you basically have all the information. I suggest you print it so you can have it if any questions ever come up about your query. Violation history. This will give you the violation details. Again, your status is open. SAP request sent 11/19, designated 11/19, initial SAP assessment was 11/22, determined eligible for return to duty, not completed, return to duty test and negative result not completed, follow-up testing plan not completed. Now, a lot of people ask, so I need to wait until this driver's follow-up testing plan is complete before you can get back on the road? Absolutely not. If that return to duty test is complete and that negative test result is in there as complete, that driver may have 2 years of testing every month randomly, and you need to make sure that happens if they're driving for you. But that driver is good and must go through that testing cycle for however long it is that SAP has put down that you need to do that. Reporting violations. A prospective current employer of a CDL driver or service agent acting on behalf of the current employer of CDL driver. An alcohol confirmation testing concentration of 0.04% or higher. This is information that has to be reported to clearinghouse. Refusal to test alcohol as specified in 49 CFR 40.261. Refusal to test drug, not requiring a determination by the MRO as specified 49 CFR 40.191. Actual knowledge as defined in 49 CFR 382.107 that a driver has used alcohol on duty, used alcohol within 4 hours of coming on duty, used alcohol prior to post-accident testing, or has used a controlled substance. Negative return to duty test results, drug and alcohol testing as applicable, and completion of follow-up testing. Again, we go back to those last two there. That negative return to duty test must be put in there, and the completion of that follow-up testing, when that driver gets done with that follow-up testing, I'm sure if I was a driver and I was doing my follow-up testing, I want to make sure that that is in there and it is complete, and that driver needs to log in to make sure that it is complete. Actual knowledge. What is it? What is it not? Actual knowledge must be based on one of the following: employer's direct observation of an employee drinking or doing any kind of controlled substance, information provided by the driver's previous employers, a traffic citation for driving a CMV while under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance, an employee's admission of alcohol or controlled substance use, except as provided in 383.21. So to go up to that third bullet, traffic citation for driving a CMV while under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance. So during an investigation, I have seen many times where a driver was written up at a scale house, roadside, given a citation, put out of service for 10 hours as being under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance. And the driver is still working for the carrier, but that driver has never taken a test. So if that driver gets a citation, or if the driver is written up for that, you need to do your due diligence and have that driver tested, because that is actual knowledge that that driver was using or in the process of using or positive for a drug and alcohol offense. A verified positive drug test result does not qualify as actual knowledge. When reporting actual knowledge, employers must upload supporting documentation, and this may include notification to report for testing, the date, the time, and the location. Any emails between the employer and the driver, and documents of termination or resignation. What information is the MRO or SAP required to report? So the MRO is to report verified positive, adulterated, or substituted drug test results, refusal to test drug requiring a determination by the MRO specified in 40.191, changes a verified drug test per 49 CFR Part 40. So the deadline for reporting this information for the MRO is within 2 business days of making a determination or verification of a DOT approved drug test, and within 1 business day of making any change in the reported results. An SAP, identification of driver and date the initial assessment was initiated, and the date of determination of eligibility for return to duty testing. So these both have to be by the close of business day following the date of the initial assessment, by the close of the business day following determination that the driver completed the return to duty test. And while we're on that subject, return to duty testing. When I was a driver and when I was in safety, that always blew my mind that a return to duty test is called a return to duty test. Because you would think if a driver is out over 30 days, that driver would do a return to duty test because the driver is coming back on duty. That driver has not been in the random pool for over 30 days. But if your driver, we had a lot of drivers that drove for us out of our Jacksonville office that were from Puerto Rico, Cuba, some were from South America, and they were citizens here, but they would go home and visit family, and sometimes they'd be gone about 45 days, and they would take some time in the summer to go down and spend time with family. Some of them had their children down there. So they were taken out of the random pool because they could not submit to a random drug test while they were away. So when they got back, because they were gone over 30 days, out of the random pool for over 30 days, they had to take a pre-employment test before you can put them back on the road. Please never get the pre-employment testing for a driver that's been gone over 30 days confused with the return to duty testing, even though it sounds like it would be a return to duty. Just threw that in there because I see it a lot. Will violations that occurred prior to January 6, 2020 be entered in the clearinghouse? No, only violations that occurred after January 6, 2020 or later. How long is the violation information retained in the clearinghouse? 5 years or until the follow-up testing plan is successfully completed, whichever is later. I have not seen a follow-up test that's 5 years yet. Can an MRO or employer report a drug and alcohol program violation if the driver is not registered for the clearinghouse? Yes. The clearinghouse will associate the violation with the driver's CDL information. This will be recorded even if the driver has not registered for the clearinghouse. Frequently asked questions. One information may be challenged by the driver. So the driver can challenge the accuracy of the information reported, report of employer's actual knowledge of the driver that received a traffic citation for driving a CMV while under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or if did not result in a conviction. The accuracy of test results and refusals may not be challenged. Once you refuse, you refuse. And once the results are in, the results are in. How does the driver change or remove inaccurate data? The driver may submit a petition via the FMCSA's data queue system. FMCSA will review the petition and notify driver of decision to remove, retain, or correct information in the clearinghouse and the reason for the decision. If the driver believes a petition decision was made in error, he or she may submit a request for an administrative review. The request must include an explanation why he or she believes FMCSA made an error in their decision, driver informed of decision, and decision will constitute as the final agency action. Once you go through the administrative review, there is no other step. The return to duty process is not changed. A driver must designate a DOT qualified SAP after a positive or refusal. Date the driver's initial SAP assessment is completed. Note, an employer must provide the driver with a list of potential SAPs. So a lot of times I don't see that when I'm looking through files that the carriers have, but it is good to look. So if you have drivers, if you have a carrier, and I'm using Georgia because I'm just kind of familiar with it. If we have drivers in Savannah, or we have drivers in Atlanta, and we have drivers in Columbus, Georgia, I want to pick 3 SAPs in an area where most of my drivers operate or where my terminals are. And everybody that comes through orientation will receive that letter where they sign saying that they're good with the annual reviews and looking at the clearinghouse. And they will receive that and sign for it. I'll get a copy of it saying that you received a list of SAPs in the area where our terminals are located. You do not have to call the SAP. You do not have to initiate the meeting with the SAP. That is up to the driver. All you're doing during the termination process is making sure they've got that form and saying, hey, let me know when your return duty process is complete if you think you may want to rehire that driver. I'm not saying rehiring a driver is wrong. And I'm not saying that you will ever be punished for that. There are some good drivers just make bad decisions. Happens every day. It happens with me every day. Yesterday, I went and bought a sweet tea and they gave me a half and half, and it was a bad decision on their part, but here's what it is. Will a driver's follow-up testing plan be available in the clearinghouse? No, follow-up testing plans will not be included in a driver's clearinghouse record. When a prospective employee has not completed a follow-up testing plan prescribed by the SAP, the subsequent new employer must obtain the follow-up testing plan from the previous employer as required in 382.413 and report the date the follow-up testing plan was completed. So if you get a driver, or say you're the carrier that has a driver that came to work for you and that driver has a follow-up testing plan, it's a year long. They work for you 6 months and then they're going to go to another carrier because they're just paying a little more or whatever reason they decide to go over there. When they go over there, make sure you understand and tell that driver, hey, I understand that you're leaving, but make sure you let me know how to get in touch with the carrier because I need to make sure they get this follow-up testing plan. Oh, don't worry about it. I'll give it to them. No. I want to send it to them to make sure they understand that you only have 6 months left. That's the reasoning behind that. Common issues. Incorrect role. Employer registered as a CTPA cannot designate a CTPA and cannot purchase a query claim. Employer registered as an assistant, not as an admin. You can't designate a employer registered as a driver. So just always make sure that you are registered as an employer and that you're not registered as a driver. You're not registered as an assistant, and you're not registered as a CTPA. Always make sure you're registered as an admin and an employer. That way you can handle all your business. Add or update CDL. Common issues. Click the edit profile or my profile from the dashboard. Click the link, add your CDL number in the upper right-hand corner. Enter information without any spaces or dashes. This is a good thing if you have a driver that has moved from Missouri to Alabama. That driver gets to Alabama, the driver's got to get a new Alabama CDL. That CDL is going to have a different number. So now you have to change the CDL number in the clearinghouse. Multiple roles, current role drop-down box to switch between roles. Employer role must be set to DACH, Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, Motor Carrier Admin in Portal. And you can see at the bottom down here that you have the violations, your queries, return to duty process, reports, and manage CTPA users and your profile. Common issues with login.gov. Now, this has been a lot lately. Change email address and authentication method. Log into https secure.login.gov / scroll to add or edit two-factor authentication. You can see I'm having a hard time with that word today. Click on add email, then click on delete next to the email address you are. Some people are having a hard time with login.gov when it comes to their portal. And this slide here, if you'll remember this slide here will also help you with your portal. That's basically the same thing. Common issues with violations. Drivers cannot view query or violation information. Verify the MRO or employer reported the violation. Verify correct CDL information was entered for the driver. And verify registration included your CDL information. A driver cannot designate a SAP. Ensure the violation was reported. If there's no violation reported, you don't need a SAP. Verify correct CDL information was entered for the driver. Ensure that the SAP is registered. Ensure the driver is entering the SAP's name correctly. Frequently asked questions. So here's some frequently asked questions before we get to Clearinghouse II. I know I'm running short on time, and I apologize for the little 3-minute delay there I had. You can have your query plans, your individual query plans. This is something you can look at a later time. How to purchase your plans, things, what is right for me. I will let other people go over that with you if you want to. Will a prospective employee's drug and alcohol violation history with other DOT modes be available in the Clearinghouse? No. Clearinghouse only contains drug and alcohol program violation information for employees subject to the testing requirements. Will every driver need to register the Clearinghouse? No. A driver will only need to register if they need to provide consent to the employer at the Clearinghouse for pre-employment and full queries. If the driver is currently with an employer, never incurs a drug and alcohol violation, and never seeks another employer, then the driver doesn't need to register with the Clearinghouse. Can an employee register their drivers in the Clearinghouse? No. Each individual driver will need to register him or herself. It says that they don't need to, but I would encourage every driver to register so they can view their stuff. Are employers of non-CDL drivers who operate CMVs required to query or report violations to Clearinghouse? No. So if you have a driver that doesn't require CDL, you're not going to worry about this. Will the employer be notified if a new violation is recorded on previously queried driver? The employer will receive a notification if a new violation was recorded in the Clearinghouse for a queried driver within 30 days of conducting a pre-employment query. It's called a 30-day look back. The employer must receive additional electronic consent from the driver before a full query can be conducted to view detailed information. So if a driver starts with you and in 2 weeks goes and does a pre-employment with somebody else, pops positive, you're going to get notification. You need to get consent, and then you need to go into the Clearinghouse and find out what happened. Will the employer receive notification of new violations within 30 days of all completed queries? The employer will not receive a notification of new violations, including annual query or ad hoc full query. The employer will receive a notification if a new violation was reported in the Clearinghouse for a queried driver within 30 days of conducting a pre-employment query. Again, the 30-day look back. Are Canadian and Mexican drivers conducting operations in the United States subject to the Clearinghouse requirements? Yes. Must Canadian and Mexican employers report drug and alcohol program violations to the Clearinghouse? Yes, they must. And the reason is because the CDLs in Mexico and the CDLs in Canada are accepted in the United States, and they follow the same federal guidelines. Can an employer designate more than one CTPA? Yes. Who will record positive alcohol results for an owner-operator? The designated CTPA will be responsible to report the violation. An owner-operator may view and query their own information, but they can't report it. An owner-operator will be required to self-identify as the owner-operator and will be required to designate a CTPA to access their Clearinghouse. Will a driver's follow-up testing plan be available in the Clearinghouse? No. Again, follow-up testing plans are given to the driver and to the employer. That way they know what they've got to do. Will follow-up testing be tracked within the Clearinghouse? No. But when the return to duty test is done and the follow-up testing is done, it will be reported as such. How does an employer or consortium third-party administrator submit a bulk query? I'll let you read that one and kind of go through it. Like I say again, I'm kind of pushed for time. Want to get the Clearinghouse II. If a driver is on the road and unable to access the computer, how can the driver access the Clearinghouse? It is mobile friendly. The driver will be able to access the Clearinghouse from a smartphone, log in and view the information, as well as provide consent, identity of their substance abuse professional, if applicable. If the driver's social security number or employee identification number, EIN, required for reporting violation of information occurring in the Clearinghouse? No. Their CDL number and state of issuance. What information is required for the custody control and alcohol testing form? The driver's CDL number and state of issuance must be entered in lieu of the driver's social security number or EIN number. Will facts and other outreach materials about the Clearinghouse be updated? Yes, and the website we have right there that will be available here is going to be available after this is over, and you can click that link and get the most updated information. So I'm going to go through here. This is if you're in Georgia, you can contact us. If you're not in Georgia, I would encourage you to reach out to the FMCSA in your state and administrator in your state. But if you are in Georgia, like I say, this page will be there when you get there, and this is how you can get in touch with our office in Atlanta. Clearinghouse update. CDL drivers in a prohibited status in the Clearinghouse will lose their commercial driving privileges. This is the big one Leslie was talking about. November the 18th, it's the day of reckoning. It's what they used to tell us in airborne school. It's the day of reckoning. It's the day you've lost your mind completely and you're jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. But the Army has no perfectly good airplane, so it doesn't matter. The second Clearinghouse final rule, Clearinghouse II compliance date is November 18th, 2024. It's less than a year away. Actually, it's less than a couple of months away. As a part of these new federal requirements, CDL drivers who have open violations in the FMCSA's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse will soon lose their commercial driving privileges. FMCSA added the following frequently asked questions on the Clearinghouse website to help CDL drivers understand the new regulations and what actions they can take to retain or reinstate their commercial driving privileges if needed. Some states, and I was going to get to those, but I was having a hard time, Leslie, Jamie, yesterday trying to get those states, but some states are already implementing this. It's not waiting until November the 18th. There are quite a few states that are already doing it. So in Georgia, you pull an MVR, it will not say that you are prohibited, and it will say that you are still licensed. November the 18th in Georgia, it will say you are prohibited and your license, CDL privileges will be not eligible, is what they'll say. So how will the second Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse final rule affect CDL drivers? As established in the first Clearinghouse final rule, drivers with a prohibited Clearinghouse status are prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle. The second Clearinghouse final rule, Clearinghouse II, further supports this by ensuring that drivers with a prohibited Clearinghouse status do not continue to hold a commercial driver's license or commercial learner's permit. As Leslie was alluding to earlier, you don't have to have a CDL. You can have a CLP and have a driver riding around with you to get your experience and still lose your privileges. Clearinghouse II final rule requires that beginning November 18, 2024, SDLAs or state driver license agencies must remove the commercial driving privileges from the driver's license of an individual subject to the CMV driving prohibition. This would result in a downgrade of the license until the driver completes the return to duty process. How will the second Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse final rule affect CDL drivers again? This means that beginning November 18th, there it is. There's the big word that just keeps coming up, a little date right there. Beginning November 18th, 2024, having a prohibited Clearinghouse status will result in losing or being denied a CDL or CLP. Note, state driver's license or SDLAs with legislative authority currently have the option to voluntarily query the Clearinghouse and downgrade CDLs for prohibited drivers and may do so before the November 18, 2024 compliance date. I can go ahead and tell you right now, there are more than 5 states already doing it. How will the second Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse final rule improve safety on our nation's roads? This is huge because our goal here is to save lives by reducing crashes from CMVs, large trucks, and buses. That's it. The requirement to downgrade commercial driver's license of drivers in a prohibited clearinghouse status rests on the safety critical premise that drivers who cannot lawfully operate a commercial motor vehicle because they engaged in prohibited use of drugs or alcohol or refused a drug or alcohol test should not hold a CDL or commercial learner's permit. This Clearinghouse II final rule supports FMCSA's goal of ensuring that only qualified drivers are eligible to receive and retain a CDL, thereby reducing the number and severity of CMV crashes. My commercial driver's license was downgraded due to my prohibited clearinghouse status. How can I get my commercial driving privileges reinstated? To have your clearinghouse status changed from prohibited to not prohibited, you must complete the return to duty process as established by 49 CFR Part 40 Subpart O. After you complete the return to duty process and your clearinghouse status is updated to not prohibited, your state driver's license agency will allow you to reinstate your commercial driving privileges. FMCSA has created a resource that outlines the steps drivers take to complete their return to duty process. Download the Return to Duty Quick Reference Guide for more information about the return to duty process, or visit the Clearinghouse Learning Center. I encourage you, when you get a copy of this, if you get it, take that Return to Duty Quick Reference Guide, print it, and give it to every driver you got before November 18th. I'm telling you, knowledge is power, and they need that knowledge because you never know who's going to be your first one. How do I complete the return to duty process and get back to being not prohibited? The return to duty process is established by 49 CFR Part 40 Subpart O, and a summary is this. Your employer is required to provide you with a list of DOT qualified SAPs. You select your SAP based on your own research. They're responsible for researching it for you. They just give it to you. Your designated SAP will evaluate you and provide recommendations for education and treatment. Your SAP will determine if you have successfully completed the education and treatment, therefore making you eligible for your return to duty test. Then you take the return to duty test, and I strongly advise that you take it not positive would be probably the best thing. Complete the return to duty process. Here's how. First, don't do any illegal substances or drink. A driver with a drug and alcohol program violation is prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions, including operating CMVs, for any DOT-regulated employer until the return to duty process is complete. By November 18, 2024, as part of the new federal regulations, drivers in prohibited status in the drug and alcohol clearinghouse will lose or be denied their state-issued commercial driving privileges. Let your drivers know this will follow them to the next state, so don't try to move and get away with it. How do I complete the return to duty process and get back to being not prohibited? Select the substance. This is the same thing we did a minute ago. You must be sent by your employer. Only DOT regulated employers and not the employee request a request. If you are an owner operator, your designated consortium third party administrator must send you for this test. Once your clearinghouse status is not prohibited, you are eligible to resume performing safety sensitive functions. Your status will be updated when your employer enters your negative return to duty test results in the clearinghouse. I encourage you to go check to make sure that was done. To remain in a non-prohibited status, your employer must complete the follow-up testing plan with you as specified by the SAP, which must include a minimum of 6 unannounced follow-up tests in the first 12 months of returning to performing safety-sensitive functions. And if you're an owner-operator, your designated CTPA must complete your follow-up testing plan. Information about your drug and alcohol program violation is retained in the clearinghouse for 5 years from the date of the violation determination or until the successful completion of the follow-up testing plan, whichever is later. Again, you have a little scan bot there. Not sure what they call it. I'm too old to know what that is. But anyway, you have that, and you can just point your phone at that, hit it, click it, and it'll take you straight to the website right there. This is also good for drivers to have. You can give it to them, and they can take their phone. They may not be real savvy with websites. They can just hold that picture up right there. You show them how to do it, click on it. It'll give them a lot of good information.
Cool.
If you have any additional questions about Clearinghouse II requirements, browse the Clearinghouse website or visit the Clearinghouse Learning Center. If these materials do not cover your question, you can also contact the Clearinghouse team. You can contact Jamie or Leslie and let them know. And my information is, if you want to write it down, I told them I was going to do this and they warned me, but you can shoot me an email to Patrick, Patrick, Elrod, Elrod, at dot.gov. If you ever have any little questions or anything like that, always feel free to reach out to any of them, or you can reach out to us, and Leslie and them reach out to us all the time. They're great people, do a great job, and they're the only ones that I know of that can get me to go and get my hair done before.
All right. So we've got some
So
questions, and Kevin, between the two of us, I think we can get them answered real quick. And I appreciate you all staying on. We had such good information, and sometimes it's hard to get it all done in an hour. So first question is, our driver's been with our company for 9 years or more. Does this mean the driver does not have to register with the clearinghouse? If yes, does the driver have to do an annual inquiry? So we always encourage drivers to register because, as Kevin said, sometimes CDL license numbers get copied down wrong. They get added to the wrong person's profile, and you want to make sure that you've always got access. But as Kevin said, if they are currently your employee, if they never have a violation and they don't go job hunting, so they have to have a pre-employment query, then technically they never have to be registered in the clearinghouse. Again, we always encourage every driver to get registered though, right?
Right.
All right.
And to allude to that, yes, that is right. If they've been with you past when the clearinghouse started, or even after, and they've never had any violations, Leslie's absolutely on point with that. There's no need for them to, but I would at least get them in it so they can check it, because like I say, it is their responsibility to make sure their information is correct. It is not your responsibility.
Cool. So does a driver who refused consent on a pre-employment query show as prohibited, and would they have their CDL downgraded?
Now, can you say that one more time? You kind of.
Sure. Does a driver who refused consent on a pre-employment query show as prohibited, and would they have their CDL downgraded?
So a driver,
I don't think so.
No. So a driver they just can't drive for you.
They can't drive for you, but they could drive
But
for everybody else. Yep. So,
right.
Okay. Let's see. How long can the driver be prohibited in a prohibited status in the clearinghouse before it's reported to the state DMV? So that's
November the 18th, it's gonna dump. And
right.
It's gonna dump in every state. That whole week, it's just gonna start dumping. So the one thing that I would encourage, and I'm not telling you to do it, because it costs money and I know it's expensive and things don't get any cheaper here nowadays. But the one thing I would encourage, I had 751 drivers at one time. All of my annual reviews were done in 2 separate weekends in January every year. Well, if I was working there now, all of my annual reviews would be done on November the 25th going forward, because I would check every driver you've got after November 18th. Give it a few days for everything to catch up, because you know the government, we're slow. And I would definitely go and start checking this, or start doing some MVR checks. But an annual review on a driver would be really good sometime in the month of November.
Yeah, and we're also working with the companies that we're the TPA for. We're going to do their annual queries in October. So if they do have anybody who's prohibited that they don't know about, they can hopefully go ahead and get them into the SAP, start the SAP process before November the 18th, or before, get it finished before November the 18th. So if they're working through the SAP and they've not had their return to duty test yet, they're still prohibited. It's not until they've completed the SAP process and had that negative return to duty test do they come out of prohibited status and be not prohibited. So, and the state has, I think, Kevin, 60 days to downgrade from the time it's dumped to the state. The state has 60 days to downgrade that license.
Right.
So cool.
Correct.
All righty. So is the return to duty test done only when all of the follow-up testing dates are completed?
No, it's the other way around. The return to duty test must be done first, and then you will get a follow-up testing plan.
Very good.
Once that
All right.
negative results.
Yeah. And we laugh when Kevin said the return to duty test has to be negative, because not always does it happen that way. All right. What if the SAP
had 3 in 2 weeks?
What if the SAP professional has a drug testing plan that is more than 6 tests in a 12-month period? So what we're asking is if the SAP has made the follow-up testing plan schedule, but they've extended it to more than the 6 and 12, which is the minimum. When does the employer mark them? So the SAP can, so the FMCSA or DOT requires a minimum of 6 and 12 months. But the SAP can extend that to up to 5 years. And they can also require more tests than just 6 a year. So you cannot, the question ultimately is, when does the employer mark them as completed in the clearinghouse? So when is the follow-up testing plan complete? So Kevin, when would the follow-up testing plan be complete?
So that whole process, the SAP will come in and they will talk to the driver. They'll find out what's going on with the driver. They'll see how long they've been using drugs. They'll find out what kind of drugs they've used, how severe it is. And depending on the severity of the drug use and what they've done through the training and the rehabilitation process will depend on how long the follow-up testing is. I have seen, there's a driver right now with a company that I kind of follow up with. He is on a 3-year follow-up testing plan. He was positive for 3 different drugs. When he went for his testing plan, he admitted he had a problem, and the random testing for 3 years or 36 months is helping him more than it's hurting him. It is keeping him clean. So that is all done by the SAP. We just require the SAPs to do 6 and 12 months minimum.
Right. So for this fella's situation, the follow-up testing plan would not be reported as completed, or the employer would not report the follow-up testing plan as completed until the end of the 36 months, right?
Right. When you receive the negative results page from the MRO for that last test, then you can complete the follow-up testing plan.
Right. Absolutely. And that again is for the employer. The employer reports that return to duty test completion in the clearinghouse, just like the employer reports the return to duty test date into the clearinghouse. So one question that we get asked a lot: if a driver gets a DUI in their personal vehicle off hours, does that affect their status for CDL driving?
So you go back to knowledge. So you have knowledge through a citation that a driver tested positive through a DUI. You would need to wait until that driver goes to court. If that driver is convicted of that, then under knowledge, would you send that driver for a random alcohol test? Because that was what the driver tested positive for in a non-CDL. But is the driver drinking while he's driving a commercial motor vehicle? So in the slideshow, it said, if the driver receives a citation for being under the influence, is this knowledge? So you have to look at what the regulation states. I can try to go back to that slide. But if the regulation states that the driver is positive for alcohol or cited for that alcohol violation in a CMV only, then what they do outside of a CMV isn't any of our business. But how old is the DUI? Did the DUI just happen? Things that you need to take into account before you send a driver for a reasonable suspicion or anything like that.
Cool. That's all we get. We get a lot of those DUI questions, so that's why I wanted to pose that one. Just got a time for a couple more, and then if we don't get your question answered, we'll come back and we will send you the answer privately once we get finished. So let me just go with can employers report violations, or does it have to be done through a TPA? An employer can report the violation. The only time the violation must be reported by a TPA is if it's an owner operator. Will along the same lines, how long does it take a return to duty test result to come back? So if you're asking how long it takes from the time this person gives the specimen until it comes back, that's usually, if it's a negative test, 24 to 48 hours to get your result back from the MRO. Who's responsible for letting the clearinghouse know of return to duty test results, the employer or the testing site? That is the employer's responsibility. And let's see, we get this question a lot. If you have a driver who's on seasonal layoff is coming back, do they have to have a return to duty test? So if someone's out of the testing pool and they're coming back, that's a pre-employment test, right, Kevin?
Yes, if they're off of your random list, and they're not eligible for a random test for 30 or more days, then they are to have a pre-employment test done, and you have a negative result in your hand before that driver is allowed to continue safety sensitive functions such as driving a CMD.
Cool. And one last question that was a great question, and we will, I'm going to do some research on this, and maybe Kevin can help me. The states that are downgrading licenses before November the 18th, I heard on one of our association calls that there was a list out there, and I need to go back and find that. So between the two of us, we'll find that list and we will try to get that out to you towards the end of the week, but it will take some research to do. So give us a little bit of time to get that to you.
And I'll reach out to the Clearinghouse team in Washington and see if they can tell me what states are doing it now.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. Okay. I think that's pretty much the majority of our questions. So Jamie, I'll let you finish up.
Thank you kindly. I know we went over a little bit. Hopefully the questions and the answers were worth it. We will try to reach back out to you and get you answers if you asked some things here that we didn't get to. The slides, a recording, and a bunch of fun stuff will come in your email later this week. So you can rewatch all this goodness or look through some of those slides with a little bit more time. I very much appreciate you, Kevin, and very much appreciate you, Leslie, for this continuance education. And hopefully everybody has a great Tuesday. Talk to you later.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks so much.